All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. Thanks for everyone for joining our very first buyers group and user devices. It's bang on 3 o'clock, so thank you for being on time. We'll probably wait a minute or so just to get as many people as we can at the start, and then we'll kick off in, say, 3 minutes. Good afternoon. If you've just joined, welcome to the call. We're just pausing for a minute at the start until everyone joins, and then we'll make it start in the next minute or so. Excellent. So I think we're at the 3 minutes mark. I would say we make a start. So firstly, thank you for joining the webinar. Like I just mentioned at the start, this is our very first end user device buyers group. So thank you for joining. Run time is about 75, 80 minutes, and we'll kick off into the next slide, please, Jenny. So just as a way of introduction, so very pleased to meet everyone. I'm Robin Bartlett. So I'm a tech category lead in CCS. My background on end user devices is supporting some of our pooling initiatives with aggregation and with the NHS. I spend a lot of my time talking to Dell, Lenovo, HP on subjects that go from MOUs, standardization, a really broad range of subjects across sustainability, etc., etc. But very, very pleased to meet everyone. I'll hand you over on to Steve to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everybody. So Steve Taylor. So I'm the head of tech hardware and sort of strategies and frameworks around that. Obviously, I've been buying technology hardware now, and technology years. So it's been a little bit of a long journey, but so what I'm hoping is that this sort of end user device sort of forum and sort of group is going to be able to sort of help guide public sector around best practice, also sort of guide public sector around how we can sort of buy most economically and get the best value out of our purchases, and talk a little bit about future direction. So very much looking forward to it.
Excellent.
Jenny, I think to you now.
Hi, my name is Jenny Tarrant. I'm a technology category support, and I will be driving the slides today, and will be making sure if we've got any questions in the chat.
Thanks, Jenny. So no webinar in public sector is ever without a quick housekeeping slide. So just to reiterate at the start, this webinar is only for public sector customers. If you're not from public sector, please exit the call. To give you some confidence, we do go through the list of attendees prior to this, and anybody who's enthusiastically joining from outside the public sector is asked not to attend. So should just be public sector today. And also just a quick note, the webinar will be recorded, which allows us to share the conversations, the sense of what we're talking about to a wider audience. So that's really, really valuable, but just to flag that quickly. In terms of asking a question, now you can use the chat functionality, you can use the question section on the interface. If it's easier to ask a follow-up question, then please come off mute. But in the meantime, if you can keep your Microsoft off, allows us to have a nice call. And also to mention, so in a few minutes or so, Intel will be presenting for half an hour. So they're taking us through challenges and trends that they've seen in end-user devices, and we'll hear from them in a second. Jenny, next slide. Brilliant. So quick one agenda. So runtime about 75-80 minutes. Really kind of covering what we're here to do. Steve's just touched on this, but absolutely this needs to be a buyers group driven by yourselves for future content, and really exploring how to try and generate best practice and spread that awareness. So we'll talk about that quickly. Then we'll go into Intel's presentation. We'll talk about some feedback, some future content, some future ideas. We'll talk about some routes to market, so what we have within CCS. We'll talk at a high level around some end user device initiatives. But I think really for this first, for the buyers group, these are my words. For this first buyers group is to hear from people on the call, feedback, suggestions, ideas. How do we take this forward? How often do we meet? All those sorts of things. So keen to frame it in that very collaborative way. Jenny, next slide. So as a group, really clear. I think there's some really clear areas of focus. So deliver savings, advocate, identify best practice, encourage sustainability. And I think the best way to do this is to help discuss, share best practice, talk about, for example, challenges, failures, talk about them openly, what hasn't worked, how can we steer other people to avoid those challenges in the past. But really as a community, develop and build as we go. So yeah, keen from a principal perspective. If you jump onto the next slide, Jenny, yeah, really focusing around collaboration. So understanding what you've found, what you've heard, what you've discovered, sharing that across the group. We'd be keen to bring in some outside experts like we have from Intel today, but really have feedback to drive the future agenda, but also identify where we've seen best practice. How can that manifest itself in case studies? We can then spread awareness and bring greater people into this buyers group, but also make it easy for different buyers to find out about this if timings for these don't work. So I'll pause there for a second. So I'll introduce you to Intel. So today we're joined by Jeff Kilford and Emily Baldwin. Jeff, Emma, if you can ask yourselves to introduce yourselves, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks, Robin. Great to be here. I'll let Em go first.
Yeah, hi there. So I'm sure many of you are very aware of Intel, but I always like not to assume. So Intel as an organisation employs over 120,000 people from across the world, and we shape the future of computing and connectivity by creating world-changing technology that improves the life of everyone on the planet. So as for my role, my name's Emily Baldwin. I head up Central Government and Defence in the UK, and I act really as a point of contact for government organisations to access the wealth of expertise and knowledge that exists inside of Intel. And my goal is to work alongside UK government organisations to drive society forward through innovation that revolutionises the way that we work and live.
Great, thanks very much, Em. So I'm Jeff Kilford, and I'm based here with Em in Swindon. I look after the large enterprise and government category within the sales organisation globally for Intel. But really my frame of reference is as an IT decision maker. I was in Intel's IT organisation for 26 years. And for about 9 years, I ran the client fleet at Intel. So I owned the budget for hardware and software. I looked after all of the ITIL functions. I was coordinating the RFPs and so on. So really my hat that I wear more often than not is an IT person. And I've spent a lot of time as an IT professional talking to other enterprise fellow travelers of IT and government as well. And now as a sales professional, I get to do the same. So I'm delighted to be here at Robin's invite. And we're going to go through a few things today. If you just advance the slide, please, Jenny. I'll talk about the broader macro effects that create more challenge for IT decision makers, and also offer some sympathy around the quandary of the IT decision maker in the modern environment, how complicated it is. Talk a little bit about some of the fundamentals of running a good business, whether you're a government institution or whether you're a private enterprise customer. I will get into some sustainability aspects, but there's really a click down that can be done on sustainability across scope 1, 2, and 3, carbon impact, and I'll just touch on that today. I'll talk a bit about security specifically, because this is driving a lot of the buying decisions that we're seeing at the moment with government institutions and also with private enterprise customers. And then talk about the advent of the AI PC, and that's a real technological change, the first major reimagining of the PC in 20 years, and it creates some exciting possibilities, but also some interesting challenges around buying at this stage and the decisions we make around buying. Just move the slide on, please, Jenny. Okay, so I'll start with how we view what's going on in the world at the moment. And we view this through the lens of an organization that has tens of millions of programmers that we connect with. We're very closely aligned with the cybercrime industry in terms of the good guys. And we still own a percentage of McAfee. We have a lot of security ability baked into our own products, with a very close eye on what's going on, whether it's a state-sponsored set of attacks or it's just threat landscape generally. And we have over 1.2 billion PCs, the Windows PCs out there, and we do have a lot of insight in terms of how end users are using those devices. So we put all of that together, and we also pay data companies, of course, as well, to give us insights into the market and the trends that we're seeing in government. And it shows us a dramatic kind of picture of change that's accelerating at ever-increasing paces. When I ran the client fleet at Intel, I could expect an operating system every 3 years. I dealt with service packs, I did the Windows 7 upgrade, and I'm rather glad I'm in an environment at the moment, because now we have a huge amount of legislation, GDPR being a good example, but it's just the tip of the spear. We see big movements in organizations. The sustainability movement is a good example of that. And this drives really the AT relevance from the back room into the boardroom. We move from a utility into a fundamental part of decision-making, the chairman and the board. Also, the threat landscape itself, you could consider a movement because it's so vast in terms of its scope, the breadth of attack, and also the level of sophistication. So we say with confidence that the threat landscape is exponential in nature because of that frequency and sophistication of threat. And we also work very closely with all of the software solution vendors around the world to get a good understanding of what's really happening, and to work very closely with them. So from a silicon chip manufacturing perspective, right through to what you run on top of Windows or Linux or Mac OS, then we spend a lot of time being actively engaged in that activity. And if we express the cybercrime industry as a GDP, it'd be the third biggest GDP on the planet at the moment after the USA and China. So we get that threat is one of the biggest drivers around decision making when you go and buy devices. Then we've seen a big transition around AI, not just what we're seeing going on in the data center, but now the advent of the AI PC and a huge amount of AI innovation at the edge, at the lap and the desk. So we're seeing about 80% of all programmers rewriting their code to leverage new neural processing units on the devices. And those that aren't rewriting their code completely are using AI to improve the efficacy of their code. So for once in the industry, we've seen, it happens very rarely, but we've seen a massive seismic shift in how all of the software is being orchestrated and run on these devices. And as hardware vendors, as we build these platforms with the OEMs, the Lenovo's, Dells, and HPs, it's our challenge to ensure we keep pace with that transition in software, and we offer the best to protect individuals and the IP of organizations, whilst giving them the greatest experiences that unleash them and they could be at their best. And then internally to organizations, because of our network of IT professionals and how closely aligned we are to them and their challenges, and we're very aware of the traditional scales of protect or unleash. And we see a lot of organizations and institutions make good decisions around offering solutions that balance those two equitably, so you get a certain level of being unleashed whilst being protected. And then conversely, we see often a trade-off between the two, sometimes an overinvestment in security that manifests itself as tons of agents on the device and a very clunky build, and sometimes underinvestment in security. And you might see a delighted end user that's very happy to have the freedom of their device and admin rights, but then you see successful malware attacks. And so if you add flexible working as a lens through which to observe all of this external and internal pressure and challenge, then that acts as an accelerant to the exposure to threat, and also the ability to drive these amazing experiences for individuals. Certainly in the private sector, more so, the retention and attraction and retention of talent is a massive problem, but increasingly with government institutions, I'm having those conversations as well. And so all of that within the context of the humble PC is relevant, because where we see organizations make great decisions around what they buy, we can see all of that managed relatively well. There's no perfect solution at the platform level that can manage all of it. It requires the best software solutions, the latest operating systems, and also best as need to provide opportunities for the IT professional to get some relief from managing the threat landscape, supporting sustainability, bringing AI into their organization, and also meet their cost objectives. They're a cost center that needs to be optimized or normalized. Sometimes they attract declining investment, and yet they've got to increasingly offer more and more stuff all the time. So these modern platforms are framed in that way in terms of the features that we put in there. So Intel builds commercial platforms that go into government. Then our OEM partners will spend about 5 or 6 months with us building a bunch of extra protection and capability around that forms our Pro platform that I'll just touch on later in the presentation. And then we work very closely, of course, with Microsoft, Google, all of the ISVs, hundreds, thousands of ISVs we work with to optimize the software for our platforms. And so it's sometimes very odd to be presented with Intel, the silicon chip people, talking about all of these real-world issues that IT decision makers face. But the point is that these modern platforms offer some relief both to the IT professional, but also capabilities and experience that unleash the individual. This year is a bit different though, because it coalesces around the advent of the AI PC. And so our usual advocacy for try and stay as current as you can, because there's more stuff in these current platforms that protect you. Work with us to identify personas that would be appropriate to extend the natural life of devices to improve sustainability. Use features that allow you to do band management and so on, that also offset the impact of carbon when packaging and moving devices that are defective from end users to the service desk. We spend a lot of time working on those end user solutions, and that's why we'd like to talk to the organization today, give a little insight into what we're seeing from a trend market perspective, a solutions general perspective, a little bit about the Intel piece. You'll be relieved it's not a sales conversation today. It's just within the context that we're seeing from those market challenges. So you can move on, please. Great. So sustainability is measured differently depending on organization, depending on if you've got a global manufacturing capability in your back pocket. In Intel's case, of course, we do. And so we look very carefully at scope 1, 2, and 3, and we put that all together to drive towards our efficacy of supply chain, our sustainability goals over a relatively short period of time. There's a lot happening between now and 2030. But what we'll see is, depending on who you're talking to through the buying conversation, they may just be counting battery life as the key sustainable algorithm driver for you. They might be talking about the amount of heat that the device would endure over a certain workload. That accounts for about 20% of overall carbon impact of these devices. So that's the entire life cycle of the device, from switching it on, putting an image on it, and then running that device to 4 to 6 years, whatever the natural life of the device is. And then end of lifing that device represents 20% of the overall sustainability impact of that device. And so manufacturers like Intel get rated by organizations like Barron's. In our case, we're happy to be number 2 in the US at the moment from Barron's ratings perspective. And it's not just manufacturers. So we when we articulate the sustainability impact, we do want to make it clear that manufacturers need to be scrutinized as well. Not only that, we're at the moment in the process of rebuilding our supply chains to de-risk them somewhat in terms of where devices are manufactured, and also to put capabilities in place with Dell, Lenovo, HP, the major OEMs, to ensure that the supply chain efficacy can be guaranteed as best it can. We are seeing the interception and duplication of discrete components on devices at the moment, depending on where the source of manufacture is of those devices and where the transit has been. And so we put safeguards in place to ensure that if you buy something for somebody, when it arrives at its destination, its firmware, its BIOS, its drivers, its physical components on that device have not been tampered with. And most organizations will have something like that. Sometimes it's just a software solution in terms of all our competitors. In Intel's case, it's a silicon solution because it's harder to access that area and tamper with it. Can you move on, please, Jenny? Talk a bit about cyber threat. I've touched on supply chain, so we do need to take stock of where were the minerals even acquired to ensure that there's no conflict within that region, there's no child labor, there's no slavery. And then we look at the movement of those minerals, the manufacture of them into discrete material substrates, and then making the products themselves, bundling them up into these platforms, and then they arrive wherever you purchase them from for purchasing. If you look at some of the other modern threat issues, this is the problem with having an exponential ramp in terms of threat landscape. It means that generationally, Intel and our traditional competition and our partners as well, we have to be very quick to market with solutions. And so within a 12-month time period, you'll see an awful lot more protection baked into the commercial strength platforms. And also you'll see software patches released by everybody, of course, for all of the right reasons. We'll say that in terms of vulnerability management, then that might be another vector that you want to look at in terms of which platform manufacturers are least vulnerable in terms of declared vulnerabilities, managed vulnerabilities, potential vulnerabilities, and so on. And we can send a note to all of you today about a white paper that ranks Intel and our competition, our colleagues, in terms of how our platforms are. So that's an independent study, so you don't have to listen to me about that. But vulnerability management is one aspect of this. Supply chain efficacy is another aspect of this. Ransomware and cryptojacking, they're particularly difficult because these are fileless attacks. They're very modern. They can attack memory. They can harvest things out of memory and cause you problems. This is the biggest thing at the moment. But there's still all the traditional attacks that require pattern management, and you probably use software to manage those kinds of attacks. But for things like control flow hijacking and ransomware and cryptojacking, it's best to have silicon capabilities that can help defend against those. Let's move on, please, Jenny. This again really illustrates the fact that government is, not overly vulnerable today, but obviously a strategic target for state-sponsored actors, even for criminal organizations that have access to manufacturing of silicon solutions. So we are in a completely different era over the last 4 or 5 years than we were 4 or 5 years ago. And the steep curve of success for these attacks is the most alarming that we've ever seen. That pace of change is rather than stagnating. And so this is our challenge. An ecosystem as broad as Intel's, making sure that the software is optimized to mitigate these challenges, the operating system itself has built-in capabilities, and that they can leverage then the silicon foundation that we're putting in place with our partners is critical. It's not a case of the operating system should be bomb-proof, the software that we run should be bomb-proof. The hardware that we buy is irrelevant somewhat because it's hardware. It doesn't do anything until the image is put onto it, but that's not the case. It really does need a good look at to see what happens when that image loads. What features will be enabled by default, by Defender, by CrowdStrike, by McAfee, that are leveraging in silicon protection features. Next slide, please, Jenny. And we are seeing that level of success, partly because of that level of sophistication and the frequency, but also the fact that people are federated and outside of their comfortable firewall. There's no conveniently co-located IT organization for a lot of organizations these days. So you need these devices to be able to take care of individuals and the IP of our organizations, and also provide us capabilities that we can reach out if the worst does happen, and we'll be able to triage those devices without the need to ship it anywhere. So those are the kind of key capabilities we're trying to build into these solutions and make sure that the software ecosystem can leverage those. Next slide, please, Jenny. Okay, I'm going to just give one example of the kind of protection that you would see on Intel platforms, whether it's vPro or non-vPro. So you don't have to be buying vPro to get this level of protection. Next slide, please, Jenny. So this is unique to Intel, but obviously most organizations will be working towards to achieve the same level of protection. I don't want this to come across as too salesy, but this is one of those features that I really like. There's a silicon-driven feature that's perfectly timed to mitigate a lot of the issues that we're seeing at the moment in terms of the threat landscape. And this is a solution that looks at memory, and it has powerful machine learning heuristics that figure out what normal memory looks like. So it'd be very much tailored towards the way I use my device, the workloads that I use, and my behaviors as well, the kind of access points that I connect to, the kind of software workloads that I'm running. And over a short space of time, it really begins to understand what's abnormal for that memory behavior. And if it sees something abnormal, it can legislate for that. So it can lock up that piece of memory, it can deal with whatever threat is in there by flushing whatever's in there, and offer that memory back up to the operating system. And also run off the core CPU. These days we have, it looks like a CPU from the outside, but there's 3 big processing in there. And the CPU, in order to run this workload, would be extremely cumbersome. It would create the experience overall for anything else that you're trying to do, whether it's Teams or Zoom or a webinar platform like this. So we run that on the GPU, and at the moment we're porting over some of that capability to our neural processing unit as well. So it's neat, because then you've got something that doesn't impact the overall experience of using the device. It legislates for a really modern threat. It doesn't have to know what that threat's called or the pattern even of that threat. It can just legislate for what's correct. And so with that, you get a huge amount of defense that's completely unnoticeable. And if you run Windows 10 or Windows 11, Windows Defender will see threat detection. It will enable the full capability of threat detection on an Intel system, which you won't get on alternative systems. And you can then enjoy that level of protection. And it's things like that that have we've put together in a number of areas on the platforms, particularly with the vPro platform, which is our commercial best-in-class platform, that's decreased the attack surface, the threat surface of these devices by 70% in 4 years. And that's why the purchase decisions become really important, because if we're buying 2 or 3 year old silicon on the platform itself, there will be a number of protections that will be absent on that device. And we have to be happy with the fact that exposure is in place. And so this tends to be that the modern device is purposefully built to deal with these modern challenges and modern threats. That's absolutely true. But there are conversations, of course, that we can have around how do we extend the natural life of devices to ensure that it stays working for us for a longer period of years. How do we identify personas? How do we use telemetry to make good decisions about smart refresh? So all of those conversations can take place and extend the natural life of devices. But this year, the purchase choice becomes a bit more difficult, partly because of the threat landscape, but also because of the introduction of the AI PC. Next slide, please, Jenny. And I will say, from a security standpoint, it is vast. There's a lot of lovely PhDs at Intel, as I'm sure there are at other silicon manufacturers as well. They're very busy people. They look at all of this modern threat. They're trying to, I was just reading in chat that somebody can't hear. Okay, I hope everyone can hear me. And this slide, it's got to build on it. What it's really articulating is, if you look at Windows 11 and all of the security features that are baked into Windows 11, you would think that the silicon, or at least the chipset guys, myself and Em, probably have very small roles to play in terms of features that would enable all of this software capability. If you just click and advance the slide, Jenny, you'll see where all of those wonderful PhDs and their acronyms come in. So I'm not going to attempt to explain any of these acronyms. Just suffice to say that the platform and the capabilities that we burn into the silicon, where it's most protected from threat and attack, Then how the Windows operating system leverages that is a very closely aligned glove. It's a hand and glove relationship that we have. And then you'll be buying ISVs over the top of that as well to give you some added protection. So that glove then extends to the fact that we have those connections with our optimized platforms for that software. Next slide, please, Jenny. I'll just touch on the Intel vPro platform. A lot of organizations buy vPro and a lot don't as well. The vPro platform is the very best in class set of features that we put into the platform based on all of those things that I talked about earlier on. So if I took stability as an example, the vPro platform takes about 4 or 5 months to engineer after we release a consumer grade device, because we go through all that certification of hardware, drivers, and software. And then we give a 15 guarantee that your image platform is going to work just fine. So that's firmware, BIOS, some of the drivers as well, and it's your connectivity, it's your graphics, it's your CPU, it's absolutely everything. So that's good for the individual because you get a more stable experience, and good for the IT decision maker, less calls to the service desk. If you look at productivity, then vPro typically attaches to our Core i5 and above platforms, and so you can't get a Core i3 vPro. And that's partly because we've got a lot to run on those devices. You need the headroom, you need the most powerful CPUs on offer, or XPUs in our case. And so you can expect to have a premium-like experience, both within the organization and from the end user's perspective, because of the fact that it's the best that we have, it's the best silicon that we have, and it's the most stable. And security and manageability I touched on, so I won't belabor it. The security piece is extensive, we know that. But from a manageability perspective, the real value proposition of vPro is that it has what we call out-of-band manageability. That means you can reach out to a compromised operating system device, even if it's not wired up to anything. You can wake that up, you can put an image on that device, you can boot to BIOS, you can do pretty much anything on that device as if it was at. It's your get out of jail really of ensuring you can reach out to the device and fix it what. So that's about Jenny could advance us. I'll touch on AI PC and then done. So the PC, great, wonderful experiences later. Things like effects, better collaboration experiences, better immersion. We're right in the middle of the AI PC revolution anyway. If you use Teams or Zoom and you're on an Intel device that's Gen 11 or newer, they're using to identify your voice, to do background blurring, to screen out erroneous noises, to better decoding on the GPU for better visual experiences and collaboration. The list goes on, and also machine learning capabilities to improve the stability of the device by on those devices based on your workloads. So we've been delivering AI PCs for some time. What's new, and it's not unique to Intel, so the likes of AMD, Qualcomm, and Apple, well, Qualcomm later in the year, but the others that have an NPU derivative now. Within our XPU strategy is the neural processing unit, and this is specific to our Core Ultra platform. Now, what it does enable is great experiences like Copilot, but we've just optimized 500 machine learning models for our Core Ultra product in business. So from a scale perspective, you can imagine that you go and buy a Core Ultra device, you switch it on. Already a lot of software is now optimized to leverage the NPU, particularly collaboration, security, Adobe Lightroom, those kinds of products. And therein lies a bit of the problem, because now if we don't buy that generation of product, whether from Intel or from our competition, what happens to the software in 2 or 3 years' time? And one of the things I was never particularly good at as an IT professional was accurately estimating the workloads we'll have to run in a couple of years' time. And nowadays, it's even more unknowable because of that huge shift in the software ecosystem. We're playing catch up with these architectures, and we're seeing a huge range of startup activity that's software based. We're seeing startups that are silicon based that can attach to an existing platform and accelerate some of the workloads we're seeing with GPUs. We're seeing organizations that are thinking, hey, this could probably move about 20% of my cloud based workloads to the cloud, to my lab or my desk. And that would make it more secure, there'd be an exposure to latency, and we could probably reconfigure some of our cloud investment as well, because it's relatively expensive to compute that way. That's the two parts of what we're seeing with AIPC. One is, yep, some fun experiences, some critical security updates and so on, but also the opportunity now to run software differently. Cloud will always be, that workhorse for you in terms of your difficult workloads. But now we're providing a platform that will allow certain things to migrate out. Next slide, please, Jenny. The AIPC is an official category of PC. It's new from Intel's joint advocacy with Intel. This is from Microsoft's joint advocacy with Intel. This is the Core Ultra product currently, and with a Copilot key. So Copilot will still reside in the cloud at this generation of product. Future generations will see the opportunity to migrate Copilot out of the cloud. But there's that 500 other machine learning capabilities that are available today in market that we feel is important to offer as an opportunity for anybody that's buying devices. So if you're looking for what is termed the AIPC, look for the Copilot key and make sure it's Core Ultra, and then you know you've got the AIPC. Next slide, please, Jenny. And I'll just close with the fact that, yes, we're in the ubiquitous age of the AIPC, or AI at the edge. But there's an awful lot in there that we think is going to be good for the IT organization. And we call that AI Ops. It's an industry standard term that is maturing over time. It's maturing very fast. But we put a lot more telemetry into these devices, a lot more AI defense and capability that will allow IT organizations to make much better decisions around things like what happens at the 4th year of the device. There's a platform service record capability that all the OEMs support on the vPro product that allows you to see how much temperature has been exposed to the device, how much moisture, how much shock, and a huge amount of telemetry opportunity. So what we're trying to do, trying to help IT organizations and decisions make really good decisions about upfront smart refresh based on the extension of the natural life of those devices where it makes sense, waterfalling down personas, however people want to implement it to improve the overall sustainability impact of those devices. But it's not just kind of a content creation thing. It's not just Copilot. There's a huge amount of experiences and a whole wealth of software that can be leveraged on day one as soon as those devices are switched on. And so that was what I really wanted to touch on, that all of these macro challenges, some of the internal challenges of being a modern IT organization, touch at security. We could go very deep on that in future webinars if the opportunity arises, the AIPC and what it really means, and then a glimpse hopefully at some of the things that are changing over the next few years. And if you look at all of the silicon manufacturers' roadmaps, you'll see a lot more AI capability in the roadmap. We'll be bringing out a product towards the end of the year, codenamed Lunar Lake. That will be a consumer variant at the end of the year, business variant in Q1 of next year. You'll see much of the same, a lot more power and a lot less power consumption. And so you'll see a decrease in the overall need for energy to drive a lot of these workloads. But we're all pretty much on the same trajectory to make that combination of vectors work for our customers. And I'll pause there, see if there's any questions.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for giving us a glimpse into the world of Intel and your partnerships and what collaborations you're doing on there. So that's very interesting. So in terms of time, so congratulations, you get 10 out of 10 for being bang on time. And we do have time for any questions. So to ask a question, please use the chat functionality, or if that's just too fiddly, more than happy to hear any questions. So just please come off mute and ask away. So we've got a few minutes for questions. I do hope Christopher Burrows has managed to resolve his audio. Yeah, Chris, if you're still struggling, then please use over the chat, and we'll try and help where we can. Doesn't look like we've got any immediate questions, Jeff. So we can hold on an extra 10 seconds or so. Thank you for your time, and thank to Emma, and yeah, many thanks. If there's no questions, everybody else on behalf of public sector, thanks for joining the webinar, and hopefully we'll talk again in the future.
Yeah, Robin, thanks very much for the invite. Thank you, audience as well. Of course, you can always follow up, Robin, if you get questions, and we'll make sure all questions get answered.
Mm-hmm. No problem. No problem.
Okay, I'll leave the webinar. Thank you.
Excellent. So that brings us an end to the guest vendor slot. One area that we might have mentioned before is just bringing in some outside experts. So it's good to hear from Intel today. Really, it's probably worth pausing now and just asking the audience, content-wise, what would you like to see in the future? When me and Steve and Jenny planned the webinar, we're very, very conscious from a buyers group. It's got to be collaborative. It's got to have input. It's got to be relevant. We've got to make it real time and all those sorts of things. So we're really keen to hear from the audience. You know, what pressures, deep dive into certain subjects. Keen to hear from the group now. So by all means, use the chat functionality, read the questions, or just come off mute. Steve, it might be interesting to hear from some of the challenges you might have heard from your dealings with customers. So in terms of what content we might consider, but again, yeah, keen to hear from the wider group.
Yeah, no, indeed. Robin, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yeah, you had a delay on your audio before. I could see you were trying to talk, but then it didn't come through.
That's fine. I've adjusted my settings. I mean, some probably sort of key areas I think for me would probably be. I know that Intel mentioned about sustainability, but for me there probably is a bit of a question for our public sector buyers around how we make devices, how we improve the recycled content of devices is probably one particular aspect, and also probably in this sort of post-COVID world, and I do wonder how long we're going to be able to say that, but in this world, I think it's probably a question of how to get the best life out of end user devices, that we can extend their useful sort of functions and the like. Those would probably be two very good key topics, and probably how we buy as well, which I know that you mentioned on a little bit later on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I agree with everything you're suggesting there. So a bit more around sustainability, around the recycled aspects of the devices that we're buying. That would make sense. Again, keen to hear from the audience. Feel free to agree or disagree.
One of the things I was just going to say on the sustainability point is some suppliers have highlighted how they are bringing in ways of us being able to swap out certain parts. Obviously, I should imagine most government departments are moving to a more laptop-based fleet, but obviously batteries, some people screens break, keyboard damage that we tend to get with the devices. Finding out more about what suppliers are doing to give us the ability to repair devices ourselves, and whether that is something that, and training staff as well, how we would train our in-house teams to be able to do those break fixes to reduce the cost to the department and obviously improve sustainability as well. If you could look at that, I know one supplier has mentioned it, but obviously if there'll be other suppliers out there that are either doing something similar, or maybe it might encourage other suppliers to look to do the same type of thing.
So all about the ability to repair devices.
Making it quite easy. I think it was Lenovo that told us about what they were doing to sort of move that way. So maybe, speaking about what other suppliers could do and how that sort of could be achieved, because then we would get a lot more value from our devices and be able to keep the fleet running on a smaller number of devices and sending them back for manufacturer repair, which is what we're having to do at the moment, or pay for quite expensive warranties on them. So obviously if we didn't have to do that, we could do the break fixes ourselves, it would be better value for money.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fine. We can definitely talk about those sorts of related sort of questions, definitely, and probably some of the services which are sort of available around that. So, okay.
Thanks, Aaron. Just to capture which organisation do you work for?
I work for HMCTS, Ministry of Justice.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Also, like between other government departments as well, if there are ways, you know, trying to get our devices wiped and sustainably sort of disposed of. Within MOJ, they have a scheme where you can send them, certain companies are training prison staff to be able to do that, but just sort of sharing what other departments do, because there may be ways that we could all help each other to, you know, add value and help with the sustainability point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk a little bit later on about frameworks and about sort of sustainability choices within that, but you're absolutely right. There is a there's not only a question as to what we do with our technology mounting, which is probably quite high, both from a personal level and from a sort of like a business level and a department level, but equally as to how you can actually sort of get the best value out of it as well, because there's also probably a question about a laptop which is 7 years old, probably has zero value, but a laptop which is 4 years old has a residual value that you could potentially get some money back from. Combining that with the sort of efficiencies that it would gain, it could be a different sort of cost model. So yeah, that's a good topic.
Sorry, if nobody else has any other questions, I've got another one. The buy versus lease sort of scenario as well. Sort of if you could do a session on that, sort of look at the different options, and if there's sort of economies of scale cross department we could get from that kind of purchasing model.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got this as a point on the deck a little bit later on, Robin. We also talk about devices as a service as well, because those are probably sort of two alternate type models. I can definitely talk you around the life cycle of costs for leasing versus the life cycle of costs for sort of typical CapEx, OpEx type model. So yeah, these are very good topics.
Hi, it's Jack from British Transport Police. I'm just wondering, one of the key things that we find, I would say we find difficult when it comes to buying and user devices is for an organisation like ours where we have, I don't want to say we have specific needs, but we specifically build our laptops with optional parts from HP or any other vendor. It's difficult to get that within the CCS platform. We generally have to go and ask a supplier to upload that specific variant, and then it sounds awful, but trawl through the same model maybe 4 or 5 times on the CCS portal to be able to actually find the one that's our build. It's quite difficult. It'd be great if there was a way that we could see have options to buy, if that makes sense, as in like a custom purchase kind of way within the CCS platform. That'd be fantastic.
Okay. Oddly, I think that was one of these things that was also on my agenda about sort of, I don't know, I'll say let me say sort of like a police catalogue or an MOJ catalogue or something like that. So therefore you put all of your items on there and the prices are sort of updated. It's already sort of in our thoughts and minds, but I think you've just sort of helped to bring that one to the top of the list. So that's good. Yeah,
and then after that, the other part when it comes to sustainability and stuff, for us, we're having to try and eke out a bit more out of our devices a bit longer a life cycle than we sometimes plan. It'd be great for us to understand how either as a collective for government organisations can either get extended warranties for a little bit longer on hardware issues, or like it was mentioned earlier about having training internally for people. One of our suppliers has noted that yes, we can do repairs ourselves, however, we have to ensure that every person that wants to do those repairs go through a paid training course, and it's not, I don't think it's very cheap either. So there's a thing when it comes to the sustainability aspect. We'd love to do it, but sometimes the cost of getting someone trained to do it from an HP specific point of view, even though I've just named the supplier, apologies. From a point of view of the service manuals are available already to follow through and through. It just has to be rubber stamped by the supplier, which is it's a bit of a downgrade when it comes to needing and wanting to do it to be sustainable when it's difficult.
Yeah, that probably for me. Sorry, Robin, I'm doing loads of talking at the moment, but that probably leads to two sort of topics. So probably a couple of you have mentioned what I would probably briefly sort of describe as sort of desk side services, which is basically those services which support end user devices, whether it's at your premises, whether it's at somebody else's premises or even at home. So those are things that we need to perhaps sort of help you with understanding what you can and can't do, but also you mentioned about sweating of assets and things like that. So there's upgrade paths as well, which can help you to stretch out the life of a device. So therefore, if you've got a device which is 5 years old, you don't necessarily have a budget to sort of replace it immediately, but you want to stretch it out, then it's probably good practice around stretching that out as well, that we can sort of highlight and some of the potential benefits of it. So, okay. Some good topics coming up, Robin, I have to say.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. So also worth mentioning from an MOU perspective between myself and Steve, from a hardware perspective, we're engaging with, obviously with Cisco, HPE, our future targets are going to be the likes of Dell and HP. So if there's some asks around what additional support we need from those vendors to make it easier to manage in life, then keen to understand that in a bit more detail. So Jack, thanks for raising that. So we might reach out to you in the future, and anybody else who's keen to understand, or if there's pain points that we think we can negotiate from a vendor perspective, I think we've been very keen to engage on those. There's a question from Lauren. Thanks for the question, Lauren, in the chat. So I'll just read through this question quickly. So I'd be keen to understand how other orgs are replacing the IT hardware, laptops, mobile phones in a proactive way before they break, but when they are end of life or before they're end of life. Is there anyone else out there in the public sector following a model of some sort? So yeah, maybe questions to the audience if anybody recognises that's something they've done and achieved. Yeah, very keen to hear from you on the call. I'd imagine, Lauren, it's a common challenge, so we can add that to the future list of topics.
Yeah, absolutely is a common challenge, Robin, I would say. So again, let's put it on the list. These are good questions for us to sort of discuss. It's got some good deep dive subjects, I think, now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when we initially planned the events, we did think about bi-monthly. But again, keen to hear from everyone now if there's pressing issues, if there's challenges, so it makes sense to do it on a more regular basis, then I think we'd be very keen to support it. So we could either do this every other month or every month. We're almost agreeing on the call now what that frequency should be. So by all means, use the chat, come off mute, let us know what you think.
Every other month sounds good to me. I will say, by the way, there is no chat function available. There's just questions for me.
Excellent. Thanks for clarifying, Jack.
No problem.
Yeah, hi all. It's Emily Guy from SCDO here. Yeah, every other month, month would work. Apologies, I was a little bit late to the session. Only been here the last 10 minutes, but it sounds like really good chat and all the items on my list as well. Just quickly on that disposal piece, actually. So we've got a managed reseller. It's actually coming to the end of the contract, but we've got a managed reseller that we purchase all our mobiles, laptops, desktops through, and we're actually trialing a new disposal service where the reseller takes back the laptops and then resells them on. We've been quoted roughly about 500k for about 20,000 laptops with a credit back of £1 million back into the FCDO. So it's a huge, big old win project for us at the moment, and that's just a trial for laptops. As most of us are probably all going through the cloud transformation process at the moment, we're just rolling out new laptops, so we're just trialing it on these old ones, and in hope that we can make this more of a permanent thing when we go out to procure in the next year for a new reseller and disposal service. Thanks.
Yeah. Just on that topic. So this question about sort of recovering monies from old assets is a big sort of topic about sustainability and circular IT. If you look at the TPAS2 framework, it's got a dedicated lot, which none of the other sort of frameworks that we've previously put in place had, around that whole circularity sort of topic. So the idea is that first of all, you can dispose, and as you say, you can recover monies for the residual value of those devices. The types of things that you've just spoken about, Emily, are exactly what should happen. Effectively, suppliers should give you a value for those devices, and you effectively sort of they become a revenue source due to the fact that they can sell them on. What this does also do is that this brings in, from a public sector perspective, an interesting dimension around us sweating assets or wanting to release assets. And so what I mean is that there can be a question of if we wanted to deliberately, from a public sector perspective, release assets back into the community so that they could be used for underprivileged sort of people, as an example, so that they could actually sort of benefit from those devices. So it's a really interesting topic, one that we can sort of talk around a lot more. But I would sort of mention that anybody who's sort of got an immediate sort of either mountain of technology, or they have a sort of a want to sort of discuss this for their next sort of reseller type agreement, then we do talk about that in our guidance around TPAS2, and you're more than welcome to talk to us as well. We can sort of give you some further advice.
Thanks, Dean. I think we can all recognise that personally we've got mountains of technology and mountains of technology at work as well. Emily, we really appreciate the update there. Very interested when you're ready or at a suitable point, if you're able to help develop a case study. I think the different levels where we can be creative in terms of what we do, but also from a commercial perspective, certainly makes it very, very appealing. So yeah, if you've got time as a follow-up, that'd be much appreciated.
Yeah, definitely. We'd be very happy to assist that. I would be very happy actually to have a further discussion on it as we move to re-procure our own reseller and our disposal reseller potentially, what that looks like really in best practice moving forward. So I'm really happy to help. Thanks.
Yeah,
that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. So jumping on to the next slide, really, it's a nice segue. So TPAS2, I should have introduced Steve as the brains and the drive behind TPAS2. So very interesting for me to observe. But I know, Steve, you're keen to articulate some of the aspects of what TPAS2 allows us to do, where we can support and have the right level of T's and C's. So we mentioned utilising lease and device as a service. So that's been a big improvement over the previous TPAS. But I know it's your baby, but you go for it.
Well, yeah, that's it. It's probably, hopefully, it's going to school now, so it's not quite that baby. But I think that So at the start of it, I sort of mentioned that I sort of probably had a lot of commercial experience around buying technology, and that's been sort of effectively through both private sector and public sector. And so one of the things that drew me to CCS was basically I sat on the other side of the fence and I've watched lots of suppliers bid for lots of work in the public sector and probably make lots of profit out of it, really. And so the idea really probably is with our sort of framework like TPAS2 is to actually sort of make sure that some of the tricks that you would see in the private sector to try and incorporate those as options within the public sector, and that's exactly where TPAS2 comes from. So therefore, what we've sort of probably got there, and we've spoken about it quite a lot, is we've got this whole question about a technology catalog, and I mentioned earlier on a little bit about standardization. So therefore, standardization is going to be one of these key things which we need to drive across public sector. It doesn't mean that we all have to buy the same thing, but we should be able to buy nearly the same thing because we all do nearly the same sort of jobs. That could be a bit controversial for our technologists, but we do want to drive standardization, as we're doing some work with CDDO at the moment, and that is showing an awful lot of potential if public sector acted as one instead of acting as 28,000 different organizations. I've also mentioned about refurbished hardware, so refurbished, remanufactured hardware, and also the ability to upgrade your existing hardware and the ability to fix your existing hardware. Those are areas that we've incorporated into TPAS2 as well. It just means that you can actually sort of get that balance model of both procuring and then managing and maintaining it, or extending the life of it and managing it and maintaining it, so you get better value for money over time. Spoken quite a lot about recycling, and it says old EUD, but in reality you can recycle anything in this framework. So therefore this is servers, switches, end user devices, mobile phones, chargers, keyboards, screens, you name it. Two good reasons. One is that it's got residual value, so therefore you could probably get some money back. Two, some of it can be recycled and it can actually be then reused back to underprivileged sort of resources. And three, because it takes probably 100 times less energy to dig out the precious metals from a laptop that's in front of you than to dig it out of the earth and to then sort of turn it into a manufactured item. So therefore, there's lots of goodness that comes from recycling. So again, that's another sort of new functionality we've got in there. And I've previously mentioned about leasing and device as a service. So if you go to the private sector, almost everything is leased. So therefore, if we are sort of buying from private sector organizations and resellers, and we ask them to provide us with laptops in this particular case, they will almost certainly be leasing them in the background because they know that that's quite an effective way of keeping cash in their bank accounts and using it for other things. If they're not doing that, they'll probably be buying it as a service, and that's another really interesting option. It means that you can refresh your devices. It means that you don't have to worry about things like repair because it all sort of happens automatically. You have KPIs and SLAs. But I can tell you that public sector, we just don't do enough of that either. So therefore, leasing is the two areas, leasing and devices as a service, something for us to explore. All of these options are in TPAS2. But I think what we need to do, Robin, is that we need to give more guidance about best practice, because it's often difficult to just write it down, but about best practice and about how we should tender and how we should write our requirements so that we can then get the best out of it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Steve. So it certainly looks like, in terms of frequency, a lot of people are preferring every other month. And I think we've probably got 2 or 3 subjects to dive into. So yeah, lots to talk about, lots to explain and cover and understand. So excellent. Just going on from what Steve mentioned there around standardization, Jenny, did you just want to flick on to the next slide? So we're keen to do, and in fact, Jenny, sorry, you can skip on one more. So what we're keen to do today is really kind of talk around. So Steve mentioned the opportunity if we can buy as one. Broadly, we have similar requirements. There was some research recently commissioned by CDDO that does start to show the benefits to public sector where people have similar requirements. We can essentially pull that volume, negotiate that volume into fewer specs and drive some fairly significant benefits. We were keen really to use this forum today to understand from yourselves what would you see as the challenges, what the thoughts, the opportunities, have you tried anything before? None of this from a concept is particularly new, but keen, most people I found from a devices perspective tend to have a long career in devices, hence from a learning perspective we can learn where we might have tried this before, where we can improve on what's been tackled before. So yeah, just keen to hear from the group around standardisation. What's your immediate reaction? Do you look to opportunity or do you look to challenges around settling a commonality of specification or configurations? What does everyone think?
Hiya, Jack again. It's quite interesting, this point, as a lot of police forces are obviously going to further align to the Police Digital Service NEP programme, which obviously, although that outlines more specifically a software level worth of items that are required on the device, but it tends to include things like, for example, using Windows Hello for Business on a device. So, for example, if we BTP, all of our devices have the IR camera for Windows Hello for Business. If that, for example, is something that all of PDS, all of the NEP aligned forces are required to have, because you're required to use Windows Hello for Business, it would make sense for, I'm saying in this case, police forces to all align to a very similar type of device. So it would be quite interesting to see how far that could go, really.
I do agree. I think, I mean, my simple view on the question of standardization, and I'll use a real world example on this. So there's a couple of warehouses which are sort of aligned to OEMs. I won't name either of them, albeit you can probably sort of guess who they would be. In those warehouses, if you was to actually go and visit them, you would see a good proportion of their warehouse which is sort of set aside for standard items. And these are standard items which are very commonly used in the private sector or used from a consumer sort of basis. And they've got a nice big stock of those, and you can sort of, if you really wanted to, you could probably get them delivered to your site tomorrow. Okay. And then the rest of their warehouse is sort of filled up with bespoke builds. And those bespoke builds, right, they will sort of have a slightly different port configuration. They'll have a slightly different memory configuration or processor configuration to those standards. They might have a different camera or whatever the case may be. But if you used to put both of those laptops side by side, you'd probably, on the face of it, struggle to actually see the difference. But the interesting part is that bespoke laptop versus that standard laptop, there's probably quite a big differential in price. There's certainly a big differential in lead time. And those are two areas that we really do need to consider. And if we can improve our lead times, if we can improve the price, then we can obviously pass on all of those benefits to whether it's putting. I'm not picking on you, Jack, but it can be sort of releasing more budget to put more police on onto the streets, as the case may be, or whatever it is. But there is definitely an opportunity here for us to buy smarter, I would say, as public sector, which will then generate benefits.
I definitely think that it'd be worthwhile CCS working alongside Police Digital Service, essentially, from what I see, to allow them to give a catalogue worth of products.
Yeah,
would be a great way, because that is essentially a standardisation route across police forces in the UK. So that could be savings to us. But yeah, thank you.
Absolutely, no, that's great. Thank you. I think, Robin, that's another good key action for us to take away.
I have that noted. Yeah, don't worry. Jack, really appreciate that input. What about everybody else? Standardisation, a massive opportunity. Obviously, it helps in terms of the upfront buying, the commercial aspect. If you can get it right, the sustainability aspect, having a pool of refurbished devices, that's potentially some bigger benefits as well. But yeah, keen to hear from people in the group.
Hi there. My name's Lauren. I'm from NHS Blood and Transplant. So we have kind of standardised / are in the process of standardising our end user devices at a local level. So, for example, all of our employees who require an iPad have an iPad. Like, we don't use Samsung devices anymore or anything. We completely weeded them out and replaced them all. And we're currently going through the process of doing the same with the phones. So we're weeding out, we've got Samsung A20s and J6s and J3s that are all being replaced with iPhones, iPhone SE. And then all of our laptops, if a new person starts, they get the standard laptop, which is a Surface Go laptop, Surface Go 3. We have various different models of that. We've got the Surface Go 3, the Surface Go 5, for the laptops, and various different. So we've got the developer spec as well for the developers that work on the team. But yeah, we're really pushing to standardise across the organisation, and we've set up that's why I asked the question before, because I've set up within my team. So I'm sort of the end user technical support manager, and within my team, I hired someone specifically to sort of roll out a bit of a project of doing device refresh, which is basically a proactive approach to replacing devices. So getting rid of all the old kit. So instead of waiting for it to sort of break and fall apart, let's replace it when it comes to the end of its life, essentially, so at 4 or 5 years or whatever. And then we're setting up a situation where we send stuff back to recycle, a little bit like the lady before mentioned, where they sort of give you credit for recycling it, and then you can use that towards asset tagging and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, so we're kind of sort of in the process of doing that, and hopefully by the end of this financial year, 2024-25, we should be on a level playing field where we're in a position where we're then moving into replacing the first Surface Go 1s that we had, because they'll be sort of 4 or 5 years old at that point.
That sounded really good. I have to say I'm sure that we've got. I think what we need to do is that using this forum, Robin, we need to make sure that we're learning from it, because there's a lot of good practice out there. There's probably ways that we can still sort of all improve, but I think it's understanding these sort of good practice sort of areas and taking it from there. Probably from a standardization perspective, I've probably got some really quite strong ambitions about it, I would say. And I think it'd be really good if we, as public sector, we agreed 2 or 3 different specs and that was it, and we ran sort of competitions to make sure. But and those are things that we're sort of in discussion about. But I think we need to start somewhere and then continue onwards from there. So, but that's great. Good to hear that good practice.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I think on that subject of starting somewhere, Jenny, do you just want to slip back to the last slide, and then we can probably make that the last discussion slide, and then talk about next steps and feedback.
Yeah, I think we did have a couple of hands up. So I think Emily had her hand up.
Hiya, it's me again. I think you've kind of pretty much phrased it there, Steve. So I think one of the biggest challenges that we have, so I'm a commercial lead, is actually knowing what the business knowing what they want. And I think that really comes down to market engagement and market understanding. And I think actually it would be really worth if you could, as a collective, as our collective government organisation as CCS, could do some collective market engagement, collective market training. So what do the resellers all do? What do your OEMs do? Even doing collective market days and I think this is the start of it, but actually more engagement with kind of what are the OEMs doing out there. And then the second point is around standardization is I think we as a collective need to ask the question of ourselves: is what is the future for EUD? Is it EUD? Is it bring your own device? Will we ever get there? We're having discussions internally about it. We know from our discussions, the likes of US and Canada, their government departments are at bring your own device, but they've been on cloud for 10 years. So it might be a way off, but I think I'd really encourage that discussion around a standardized approach across government to our requirement setting, as well as our future of EUD and what the landscape looks like. Thank you.
No, I completely agree. I think we do need to learn from other government departments, and as you say, US, Canada, Australia, etc. They've all been doing different things. BYD is also something we need to discuss. It's got pros and cons. We need to understand that. Again, we can probably learn a lot from the private sector as well, who've been through this circle as well. So, but really, really good topics. I agree. We can sort of go through that in more detail.
Jenny, who's next with the hand up?
I think it was Matthew next.
Hi everyone. I work for a larger government organisation. We kind of at the moment we have an option for new starters, and it's either a Dell or a Mac. There's no other ability to choose beyond that. If you need a specialised device, then it's basically per request on top of that. So for us, standardisation is, well, it's kind of there for us, but for me, I suppose the question is really around what's the minimum requirement going to be? Where do we need to go to? Like for us, the basic spec now, the base spec is i5 processor, 16 gigabit of RAM, 256 gigabyte SSD, 14-inch screen. That's the minimum now for us moving forward. So I think it's not necessarily a challenge, but a consideration as to one step towards standardization is, where do we draw the line? Where's the bottom line for all of it? And where we think, because we all know that Teams and Chrome is an absolute hog of both battery power as well. Should there be other considerations beyond just that base spec for battery capacity? The ability to change out, how difficult is it to upgrade devices? If it's a Windows device like a Dell, super easy. But if it's a Mac consideration, it's almost impossible. So it's just kind of like future-proofing the standardization, but also, I suppose, coming down to a bottom line as to where are we actually going to draw the line and say we're not going to go any less than this.
Yep. No, I agree, and that's part of those conversations that we're having about standardization with CTOs and CDDOs, the CDDO council as well, because it's, as you say, they're key considerations, definitely.
And one of the follow-up as well is around accessibility. So I'm having a very hard time at the moment actually getting an answer regarding what is considered a lightweight laptop, for example. I've reached out to HR internally. Obviously, this isn't a question for you, but generally, if maybe there was a standardization of, what is defined as a lightweight laptop, because what is lightweight for one person might not be for the other. It would be great to have that type of steer as to what a collective agrees is lightweight. Obviously, there are alternatives out there, but we're not trying to diversify. We're trying to minimize what's there. So, yeah, we've got MacBook Airs, but then not everyone wants a Mac. We've got Dells, but some people might want Surface Pros because they're slightly lighter again. So I think it'd be good to have a standardization for other areas outside of kind of BAU, like accessibility as well.
Yeah, but very good points. I think when we discuss standardization, I think sometimes that could be a case of it's just having clarity on what's required, and then having better visibility and an understanding of how does that catalog build. I think some of the thinking and why we're keen to touch on this slide here is just having a really clear starting point. So if we're able to define the subcategories, the catalog, the clear definitions, being able to build that into a platform like we have now, we've kind of got the ability to do that now within the online product catalogue. So when we talk about when will we know when we get there, it'll be a case of almost having maybe a number of areas signed up to work to collaborate on the specification, building things onto the online product catalogue, and then agreeing those with the vendors and going from there. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a kind of a written down in stone. It can be a flexible process. But I think you're right to flag around accessibility and having that covered from standardisation perspective. So thank you. Jenny, anybody else with a hand up?
No, I don't think so at the minute.
Excellent. Excellent. So in terms of this last slide, so we are focusing a lot on the online technology catalogue. It's a key area for us. Jack made some really interesting points around how could catalogues in the future be more closely aligned with their own requirements and having almost a skin over that catalogue, so it's a much clearer customer curated choice. That is one area that we are looking at, and I think it's moving forward from looking at to actually considering how do we do it, who goes first, etc., etc. So Jack, very, very keen to do a bit more of a follow-up on there. But worth highlighting what's happened over the last year or so. So more closely aligned now with TPAS2, so 110 plus resellers now onboarded, supplying up to I think 300,000 items. So really, really comprehensive. I think we've got 2,000 registered users, bundles, refurbished laptops. But we were very, very aware that we feel like we're at the very start of this journey. There's customer journey improvements, further improvements we could do in terms of how customers can pay and check out within the basket to make it a lot more customer focused. But keen to understand if there's anybody in the call who is a user, you might have some relevant feedback, or if there's anybody who's not a user, we can set up some initial tutorials and the like. So yeah, just keen to see if anybody is almost a power user with some feedback for us.
I have a little bit of a follow-up question to that, and I'm not sure if anybody's going to sort of jump onto it, but one of the follow-up questions that I had, and this is probably more to do with sort of not necessarily the big central government departments, but sort of other departments, but is there any sort of other functionality that you'd like to see in the online catalogue? So I'm thinking about, I don't know, schools and sort of, you know, small charitable users, etc. Do they need, I don't know, sort of like a credit card type sort of functionality or something like that in order to complete their purchases because they haven't got the full-blown ERP systems and PO systems in the background? Any of those sorts of inputs, any extremes, very, very welcome to see and sort of hear them.
Thanks, Steve. Good shout. Good shout.
Hi, just a question from me, Sally Boron from Macmillan Cancer Support. I haven't used the RM6098 yet, but I've got a question with regards to how to use it in case we want to use a supplier from it for the IT lifecycle services, but at the same time use the catalogs to buy IT hardware. Would the suppliers be able to have access, or how would it work? Would we need to put the orders in and send them to the supplier? What I'm trying to ask is essentially, have we got anything in place that kind of combines the two together?
I'm going to say that in theory we do, because the catalog suppliers, so all of the suppliers on the framework are on the catalog, so therefore the recycling suppliers are there as well. What we can do is if we make sure that we've got your contact details, if you reach out to us, we can talk through the specifics offline.
Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. Good shout. Good shout. Just conscious there's a few more questions in the chat. So James, yeah, absolutely bang on. A lot of the outcomes we had from the NHS pooling is a similar standardisation. So i5, 16 gig RAM. What you've typed there, you could summarise as being a standardisation catalogue starting point. So yeah, great points. Steve, there's a question from Thomas. So we're looking at our T+2 route to market to purchase our NDTs, mobile data terminals, on appliances for DFRS and NFRS. Are we allowed to specify the device make and model as part of the procurement process?
I'm going to say yes, you are, because you can then effectively sort of go out to market and compete for that, because different resellers will have different discount structures with those OEMs, and take it onwards from there. So you're still running a competition. It's unfortunately, this is a little bit of a technology sort of dilemma that we have, and probably Microsoft is probably the key example of that, which is it's really difficult to sort of run a completely sort of unbiased process when you're still buying a Microsoft license. It's an ongoing problem. So the short answer is yes, because most of it is bought through resellers, and the resellers will be competing for discounts and competing for pricing and margin, and so therefore you've still got a competitive process under there.
Brilliant. Thanks, Steve. Thomas, hopefully that has answered your question. Jenny, is anybody else with a hand up? Mindful we're probably coming toward the end of the slot that we had, but yeah, keen to cover if anybody's got a hand up.
Not that I can see. I think we've answered Emily's question, or has Emily got another question?
Yeah, sorry, I've got my hand up again. Hiya. Just a comment really on the card spend that you made before, Steve. And I can only give the experience as SCDO, but we have a similar kind of localized spending, as you can imagine, across the world at each of our posts, where they use the catalogue and they now have a card.
Yes.
There has been quite significant, we've seen quite a significant rise in shadow IT from that, because essentially what happens is you give a team a card. They will start by buying on the online tech catalogue. They'll then start buying alternate options on the online tech catalogue that aren't part of our tech solution. They will then use that card, say, at Amazon and online and the rest of it, which then causes significant issues around what we call our shadow IT.
Yes.
Which we're trying to really get to grips with. And it also kind of skews our requirements understanding, our spend understanding. It's quite a minefield at the moment. So it's definitely one to consider in terms of card spending, but it does come with the risks that we've seen.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. They are really very relevant points. We don't want to sort of, I think they're very useful for some aspects of public sector and wider public sector, but they can be equally, as you say, they can generate a sort of like a shadow IT sort of service for other departments. So yeah, it's a good reminder. Thank you.
It's a balancing act, and we're still trying to find that. We're still trying to find that.
Indeed. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for the comment, Emily. That's great. So mindful of time, so we did have a closing slide. Before we get to that, just again, firstly to say thanks for the engagement, thanks for the questions, the feedback. So we'll send the slides out so you've got a copy of them. We wanted to highlight the next hardware aggregation is planned in the autumn for this year. The link is there. Like I mentioned before, if you're new to the end user device catalog or you'd like to find out more, contact that email address there, and we'll go from there. Sounds like it's bi-monthly, every other month. So we'll send out the next link in the coming week to get that in the diary before we all jet off on holiday. And again, just thanks for the engagement on the future content. I think lots to unpick in sustainability, best practice that we can do there, standardization and how that can drive better practice on sustainability. Yeah, without eating too much into your afternoon, thanks by me. Steve, any closing words?
Other than thank you for everybody for their inputs. I'm glad that we've had such a sort of a set of questions and sort of asks from everybody who's been attending. I think the idea of this is to try and make make our buying journeys better, for us to get better value, to make sure that we're making really sort of good informed choices. So I think hopefully you found it useful. We certainly have, and what we'll do is it will take some of these topics and start to build on them in the future. That's great. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everyone. We'll re-engage either on one-to-ones or on the 2nd of July. So thanks for your time. Speak then. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. It's been
Thank you.
great.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. I'll make some notes and I'll ping them around to the team just to say thanks for your time.
That is great. Thank you, Robin. I thought that was really good.
Yeah,
Really did. So well worthwhile.
yeah, lots of content, future content.
Great stuff. Indeed.
Thanks,
Speak to you soon. Cheers. Bye for now.